Hello, friends. You are now listening to I Know Nothing. My name is Marcus, and I'm here with George. And today on the podcast, we'll be talking about wind power. The I Know Nothing podcast is a progressive story. Up until recently, George and I have done nothing positive towards the environment. We don't feel associated with the climate advocates of our day, partially because they feel so far removed. However, that must not stop us. So today, we want to become more educated on issues surrounding the climate and hopefully show the struggle and success of our journey to help others. So, I think before we begin, George, we should address something that we said last week about phantom energy. And I would just like to point out the thing that we did not think about initially. When I made the statements about phantom energy being negligible in your household saving, I didn't actually consider businesses. And it was really interesting while I was working in my normal job last week, the fact that a lot of people still left their computers on, etc. And then I said, oh, wow, 1% of a business's energy, phantom energy output, is actually a huge amount of energy that they could save on. So just because it's 1% in the home is negligible doesn't mean it's negligible on a grander scale, which I guess should be noted. So, without further ado, George, tell me about your week.
I can't complain, really. The week's been really good. I built a bike rack out of scrap wood from a skip nearby with my flatmate, which was cool. It's just nice to be creative and do something, manual. And it actually seats 6 of our bikes really quite nicely and neatly in the garage. So, yeah, it felt like a good use of time. That was fun. And then I also played badminton for the second time. But actually, I think sucked more than the first time, which was kind of sad. So,
was it with the same people that you played with last time?
Yeah, like this club group thing, social group. But yeah, they weren't impressed at all, really. But it's fine. I'll keep going. I'll persevere.
You have to persevere.
I just can't serve just at all. So it's quite painful the person in my pair because I just serve it and then it just comes back at them like absolutely flying. So yeah.
Have you played tennis before or anything?
Yeah. I'm not horrendously bad. It's just the serve on badminton, like, is quite specific. I can play once it's moving. It's literally just that first serve that I lose like 5 points a game just from the serve.
Oh, those aren't great numbers, mate. That's really poor.
No, yeah, I know.
But you can always get better. That's not a problem.
Yeah, thanks.
Hopefully.
What about your week?
Actually, last week you kind of inspired me to do something in terms of health and fitness as well. Kind of been slacking on that front. So I went to the gym a few times. I don't know why I said a few times. I went to the gym one time. I don't know why that.
It's better to dress these things up.
100%. Yeah, because you were saying all the things that you were getting up to, and I also signed up to like this 13-kilometer obstacle run. It's called Viking Strong, and I then realized I have 5 weeks to train for a 13k run, and I don't even know if I can run 13k. So I thought I better go to the gym.
Yeah, probably.
I'm a bit. However,
not going to dress this one up for you, mate.
However, we've discussed David Goggins before, and I listened to his video, and he was like, "Yeah, I ran 100 miles without training," and so I'm kind of going on that front,
Yeah, perfect. Such a good idea. 160 kilometers. He ran over 10 times more than you.
So if you can do it, I can run at least 13k, surely.
Yeah.
And if not, well, maybe I should not be just not strong enough for our ecosystem,
Yeah, natural selection will call you.
Exactly.
Move you along.
Yeah.
Make space for the next.
Exactly. And if anything, I'm a detriment to our environment anyway. So, great.
Yeah.
Win-win for everyone, really.
Cheers, mate. Bye.
See you later. So, that was funny. That was fun. Good laughs all around. You want to update us on the challenge, George?
Yeah, so last week we continued our challenge from episode 9, where we pledged to plant a tree for every 5 likes we get on a certain post on our social media pages, and we also agreed to try out Olio, the food sharing app. I'll be honest, I totally forgot to try Olio. I didn't even get as far as downloading the app, to be honest.
Oh, no.
I promise I'll do it this week to make up for my poor performance, but yeah, I just completely forgot. It's actually really ironic because when we finished writing everything for this, I went downstairs and my flatmates had come back with just the mother of all hauls from Olio.
Oh, really?
Like, stacks of Planet Organic sushi, brownies, chicken, salmon. Yeah, just like,
all for free?
Yeah.
Oh, mate, that's unbelievable.
Yeah, so in my house has at least done it, but it wasn't off the back of me, sadly. It was just the fact that they're better people than me. So, yeah, that happened. And at least our other challenge is doing better than me, because we're now going to have to plant 85 trees, which I think we've made a beautifully tragic underestimation of how much support and enthusiasm we'd have for this project, because 85 trees is a horrible amount.
Mate, I don't actually know how we're going to complete this. I kind of want to go back on everyone and say, ha ha ha, jokes. It's actually 20 likes per tree. But yeah. No, 85 trees is a lot. I actually Googled quickly if it was illegal to just plant them anywhere. And yeah, it is. You have to get permission. Yeah. because of roads.
As long as they don't know it as us, though.
Well, now they will, but yeah.
We could be doing it anywhere.
Also true.
Trees start popping up. We've talked about it. It's not necessarily us.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm hey, look, I'm fearless when it comes to this kind of stuff. We'll do it anyway. And repercussions afterwards.
Woo.
But that Olio thing, I couldn't really complete that challenge either. I downloaded it, so I did better than you. And no one was posting anything. And of course, the app kind of suggests if you look a little bit further afield, you'll be able to find some items. But then, the point is to reduce our impact on the environment. And I thought traveling, by train to get some free food was a bit counterintuitive.
Yeah, because for starters, I assume you've got to pay for the train. Not that that's the point, but so then you don't save any money.
Right.
And then also you've contributed to
further travel of getting that food.
Yeah, I mean, I guess is the argument that the train was already running? I don't know.
No, but let's not open those doors.
Really, is it?
Let's not open those doors.
Yeah, no.
Otherwise, this will be a long podcast.
Anyway, let's hit up the main topic. Marcus, remind us what we're getting ourselves into.
So today we're going to be talking about wind power. We wanted to discuss renewable energy, but we felt that we couldn't do justice in one episode. So we've had to break it down into the segments that we kind of know of. So we're starting off with wind power. And George, what do you know about?
Well, this I think might be it might be the topic that I know most about, except mincing my words on it, because I actually studied renewable energy as part of my physics degree. I've forgotten a lot of what I learned, so I can't really stand here and preach anything, but it was in one of my final exams, or it was an entire final exam was based on it, and almost every form of renewable energy. So I think that I should have a well above average grounding in the topic. Although I suppose what I learned was a lot more technical than actually useful or applicable knowledge. So while I understand the I don't know how much a wind turbine can produce, how much energy a wind turbine or a wind farm could produce, and I could work that out for you. That doesn't necessarily translate into anything useful, because you can look those stats up anyway, and the stats are more useful than the knowledge of how you get to it. But at least it means that I can maybe spot inconsistencies. What do I know outside of weird maths? Well, I know that the UK has the highest offshore wind power output in the world, and also has the largest wind farm in the world, or at least offshore wind farm. So what we lack in sunshine, we more than make up for in some exceptional wind strengths. What about yourself, Marcus? What do you know?
That only makes sense, right? I mean, if you stand on the cliffs of any English cliffside or Scottish cliffside, it's so windy. You're being buffeted along. It only makes sense to use wind power.
It really does.
Yeah, so actually what's really interesting, George, is when we started this podcast, I kind of forgot what you focused on in your studies. I knew you did some kind of physics degree and all of that, but I didn't know that you did focused on renewable infrastructure, etc. And so that has turned out very well in terms of our podcast. What a source of knowledge. But in terms of my source of knowledge, kind of letting the team down a little bit. For wind power specifically, it's minimal. Of course, I know that wind power is dependent on wind.
Sure.
So that's pretty good.
Good start.
I also know that the windmills are designed like propellers, and the propellers, when they're being moved by the wind, produces the power, which I guess goes into a generator and then transported via cables to the national power grid, I assume.
Nice.
And yeah, I also know that the most common source of renewable energy as a country is wind power. I'm pretty confident in that, just because there's so much wind. And you can, as a country, you can always put them out at sea too.
Yeah, I don't know if it's always the most common source in a country, because if you think like a landlocked country or a country where it's really sunny and not very windy, maybe they've got more solar energy than wind. I don't know, but I hadn't actually thought about explaining how they worked. It's a good point. I suddenly took it for granted, but they actually, it's weird. They actually work similarly to many of our electricity production methods that use coal and nuclear power. So in the same way that steam in a coal or nuclear power station drives a turbine that generates electricity, the wind turbines are driven by wind spinning the blades, like you said. So instead of the blades pushing air backwards, like in an aeroplane, the wind causes the turbine blades to rotate, and that generates electricity. So it's kind of like a backwards engine. In an airplane, you use energy to spin the propeller, whereas in a turbine, you gain energy by spinning the propeller.
Cool. Sorry, I thought you were going to carry on. I didn't know that you were finishing that sentence.
That's me.
One thing that I also know is that wind turbines take up land that could otherwise be used for trees and farmland. So on that side, it's kind of a negative feel. Trees and farmland could be used for other things. And also, I assume that windmills kill birds. To what degree, I don't really know, but I just assume that if you got some kind of propeller floating in the sky, that some birds are going to be killed.
Sure.
And that also, as a sub-note, the blades are made from fiberglass to make them lightweight, thus moving in the air. But it would also be interesting to compare how much materials are needed for each windmill, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure.
So that's what we knew before starting. Let's share what we found with a few days of research, George.
So I wanted to start by putting the UK up on a pedestal for a minute, actually, which is something that I feel we don't get to do very often as a society or as a country.
Especially
We don't
recently.
often... Yeah, sure. Oh, God. Don't. Like I said, though, the UK is top for offshore wind generation. And so it's majorly important in producing the power we need for our homes and businesses. So much so that in Q1 of 2019, 21.2% of the UK's energy generation was from wind farms, which is mental when you think about it. It's such a big percentage. Renewables made up 31.1% of the UK's energy generation. So that means that wind farms contributed to 2/3 of the UK's renewable energy generation.
That is pretty amazing.
It's quite a big deal, yeah. And in my opinion, it means that we should be seriously proud of our capabilities here. You know, for anyone listening in the UK, this is something that doesn't get spoken about a lot, I think. There's a lack of awareness of how much effort some people are putting into making the UK a bastion of renewable energy. And like we've mentioned before, I think the UK went the longest it's ever been without coal power or non-renewable sources for however long it was, for hundreds of years. So yeah, I think it's fantastic. Although, all in all, I think very little is known about these quiet giants that are sort of scattered throughout our countryside, mainly because people just view it as either an eyesore or don't care but don't know that much about them.
I don't think many people consider them as eyesores anymore. Do you remember that conversation started like a few years ago and everyone was almost up in arms like, oh, they're so ugly. But now I really don't think people care. It's a bit like solar panels on roofs.
Yeah.
That was like, oh, why would you ever do that? They look so ugly. But now,
I think you're right, actually. I do think perceptions have massively changed, haven't they?
For sure.
And I think it's partly with that, the increased awareness of the climate, and people are realising that you sound like a bit of an arse if you're like, oh no, I don't like the view. I want to watch the world burn.
Well, Steve, you won't have a view in the next 20 to 30 years, Steve.
Wow, why are you picking on Steve, Marcus?
I always feel like you've got a Steve somewhere that, just needs to be told a few things.
Yeah, sure.
No, Steve just came up. I don't know. Here's another question. Do you think we've maxed out the capabilities of wind power? Maybe that's too big a question because we didn't actually look at that. But
I think there's probably a government study on that. I don't know.
No.
I'd love to be able to pluck it out there right now. But I don't think we've maxed out the possibility of it. Firstly, because there's probably more potential for offshore wind.
Yeah.
And also, at the end of the day, there's almost certainly more potential for onshore wind. However, to what extent, I don't know. Obviously, later on, we're going to find out about the effects and sort of some of the things that limit where they can be. So,
and 21.2% is nothing to be laughed at. That's already doing quite well.
A fifth of the UK's energy production. I mean, that's wow.
So, I wanted to find a comparison between wind energy and fossil fuel energy. An estimate I found suggests that yearly emissions eliminated by generating energy from a 1 megawatt wind turbine instead of 1 megawatt of conventional sources resulted in a reduction of 1,500 tons of carbon dioxide, 6.5 tons of sulfur dioxide, and 3.2 tons of nitrogen oxides, and 60 pounds of mercury in 1 year. I apologise for saying 1.5. This
is that because
Europeans use the commas, and I read it. I had a brain fart, but it's 1,500 tons.
It makes perfect sense that you've read it wrong. That's quite funny.
Yeah,
I think you can be forgiven.
Thanks, mate. That's probably not the excuse either. I just really messed up.
1.500.
Yeah.
Anyway, to add to that,
onshore
wind is now the cheapest form of electricity production in the UK. Some modern wind farms are taking as little as 5 months to produce as much energy as they took to make, and the same amount of time to reduce carbon emissions by as much as it took to produce them. So that means that after 5 months, they are essentially making clean and just not free, you've got to maintain them, but clean energy that the argument of, oh, well, because it's something I wondered, how long do these things take to recover their carbon output for making them? But actually 5 months is seriously quite short. That's pretty good. That's quite impressive.
Yeah, it was interesting when I read that source. The first thing that came to my mind was, of course, the fact that a lot of these blades are made from fiberglass, and so the production of it can be done in 5 months. But I know what it's like to make something out of fiberglass. There's sometimes mistakes. There's a lot of focus on impregnating the glass fiber correctly, especially with these lightweight products. And so I did do a little bit of reading as well, just to be a little negative. I don't want to be a Debbie Downer this podcast, but I feel like it'd be interesting to even play that role. So, fiberglass cannot be recycled, which is one of the points. And I did read some anecdotal evidence from a manager of a wind company, saying that he's seeing more and more wind turbines break down before even 5 years old, instead of their 20-year lifespan that they claim to have. And the reason why he says is due to manufacturing trying to keep up with the market demand, i.e., the wind power market is increasing exponentially, and therefore causing a lot of design and build errors, hence why they are breaking down after 5 years of use. So on the one hand, you say that we can make them in 5 months. In my head, that's quite a short span, especially with the amount of growth that is happening at the moment. And I don't think it's as easy to say, let's just build more very quickly. But it's good to see it anyway, if that makes sense. I'm just saying.
Well, just to clarify, what I was saying wasn't that they could be built in 5 months. It's that they take 5 months of use to produce the energy, so the electricity that they take to make. So obviously it takes to heat up the fiberglass, it takes energy, etc., and it takes 5 months to recuperate that. The same as for the carbon emissions of driving them, for burning the fuels to heat the oven to So, but I do see what you mean though, and I think there is definitely an issue with manufacturing.
It's interesting
letting them break down quickly,
for sure.
Because what the issue there really though is not necessarily about the environment, because 5 years is much longer than 5 months, so they're still positive in that time. But there's a huge amount of waste. There's quite an impressive amount of waste, considering how many wind turbines there must be in the UK.
Yeah, no, that totally summarizes my point of view, and that makes total sense.
Although I did actually read, and I don't know for sure, because I think it's under trials at the moment, but people are starting to find uses for recycled carbon. Was it carbon fiber? No, fiberglass.
Fiberglass.
In reinforcing concrete, apparently it can add structural integrity to concrete if you mix it in the right way.
Potentially the fibers, but once you've impregnated the fibers with glue, resin, it's very difficult to reuse that, because the strength obviously comes from the fibers itself. The glue just...
Yeah, but I think it's actually mashed down, if that makes sense. So it's...
Potentially. I haven't seen anything like that in my studies, at least. That's one of the... For boat building in particular, that's one of the areas where a lot of companies are looking into, actually, because there is kind of a problem, especially with fiberglass and water, to be able to, one, repair quickly, but two, being able to use a more renewable material.
Sure. Interesting. So do any of the boats, ships, yachts, whatever on earth you make,
Yeah, kayaks.
Kayaks. What do they include? Are they made out of fiberglass?
No. We predominantly use steel and aluminium, which
Okay. Nice.
seems pretty outdated, but actually it's still probably one of the most eco-friendly ways of building boats.
What's your favourite grade of aluminium?
I think it would be H3024 for me.
Nice.
But I think that might be a steel.
It certainly might be.
I think that might even be totally incorrect as well.
Well, I know that some steel grades are EN, a lot of the common ones, but I doubt they're used in ships. I don't know. I don't know if that's stainless steel either. Who knows? I know that some aluminium's AMS.
I'm actually having to Google.
Listed off some numbers.
Yeah. H3. Oh, H32. That's the one. Oh, that old chestnut.
What did you say?
H3024, something like that. Aluminium alloy 5083 H32. That's the one. That's the number. That's my personal favourite, George, if you'd like to know.
Very nice. I've been playing around with some AMS. I don't know what the numbers are.
Yeah.
But yeah, so anyway, sorry. Sad question to ask, really, wasn't it? I don't think we're going to get much props for that conversation live.
You kind of put me on blast there. Now I really look like I don't know.
Yeah, do you even want this job?
No.
Do you even want to work?
Yeah.
God.
It's not like I'm a structural engineer or anything, no. So, I think what I would like to also then go on to, like I said, don't want to be too much of a Debbie Downer on wind power, because I think it's really interesting and it's amazing that we have been able, well, the UK has been able to produce energy via wind power in terms of 21%. But I did try and look at the negatives, and specifically with the modern day wind turbines. One of the things that did come up quite regularly is the deaths caused to flying animals like birds, insects, and bats. Specifically, there have been studies by bat scientists that have been published on the fact that wind turbines have caused a huge amount of deaths in migratory bats, such as the Huari bat, and are actually facing extinction due to wind turbines. And I was going to say partially due to wind turbines, but this study was it's due to wind turbines. So that's right. Me paraphrasing.
Okay. Well, I think that is interesting, and in fairness, it's quite worrying. However, I do feel like some perspective is necessary here, because according to the Centre for Sustainable Energy, wind turbines account for 0.01% of avian deaths caused by humans.
Oh, you took... Okay. I didn't know that. Well, that is interesting. I hate this, George. So, for everyone, we do use a little fact sheet, yeah? And one of the facts that George said was to do with cats. And so my, backup fact to go against his point, I was going to say then, but he's done the classic switch and smoke and mirrors move.
No, this was always here, I promise.
Yeah, probably. I don't read. I didn't know that. Could you elaborate on any of that? Because what I was going to say was that fact
I can elaborate on that, and because I think I see what I think I know what you're getting at, and that's that it's and I think maybe you're about to make a valid point, but that study is basically saying that far more deaths come from cats and buildings and cars and things like that than wind turbines, and that's why I'm saying about perspective, because while yes, then you can put some pretty scary numbers out there with lots of zeros after them for deaths of birds from wind turbines, but then when you actually look at the other numbers involved for other things, there's a lot more zeros that follow them.
Yeah, no, and I understand that. I think it's worth noting the fact that a lot of the news sources saying that this is incomparable referred to cats. I guess one of the points that I was going to make is that cats don't kill apex predators. So the likes of these wind turbines are killing the likes of eagles and hawks and all that kind of stuff too. So that was...
I see what you mean, yeah.
In
so
terms of the
it has
ecosystem,
a disproportionate effect versus like cats will kill a load of small birds.
You're right.
Okay, yeah. I wonder, but then I suppose it's maybe too big of an assumption to make that's not an issue. Or not that you're necessarily saying that, I guess. As in, we've got loads of cats. They weren't there before we started. To be fair, I think we've had cats for ages. The Egyptians loved them, didn't they?
Yeah.
So maybe
some would say worship them.
Yeah, yeah, somewhat. So, yeah. Although on that matter, on birds and the effect that wind turbines have on them, the RSPB actually came out and spoke against the media's suggestion that birds were being harmed disproportionately by wind farms. Apparently, some poorly placed US and Spanish wind farms drove up concern, and the media sort of tagged onto this. But wind farms can be placed carefully to have almost no effect on the local bird populations. The RSPB actually built their own wind turbine. So I think this says it all in that sense, really. And furthermore, per gigawatt hour of electricity, fossil fuel plants kill 17 times more birds than wind farms. I think the RSPB's take-home point was that carefully placed wind farms have little effect on birds, and the biggest threat to a population is actually from climate change. Having said that, one thing to add to that is I think those stats, because I don't really like those stats, although I suppose it's actively happening, and it's maybe testament to how bad climate change is for birds at the moment. But that 17 times more deaths from fossil fuels plants than wind turbines is literally because of climate change. That's how many birds are dying, and it's the climate change that's attributed.
Not the actual plant.
Climate change, but it's climate change attributed to fossil fuel plants.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like, well, it's like they're not actively chopping them up,
No.
like a wind turbine kind of is.
But then you could say that, oil and stuff is killing birds on the shores and oil leaks, etc. So
yeah, absolutely,
maybe. But and so then I agree, due to the fact that I'm not an expert at all. So sorry. But with the ability to scale, so the premise of wind farms is the fact that we have to have space to, put these wind farms in. And especially, I guess, with land onshore ones, there is a maximum amount of space that you can take up, right? And so I understand that the RSPB have said you just need to place them more carefully. But once we start reaching that max point, it's going to be very difficult for these wind developers to place them carefully. Once all the carefully placed wind farms areas are taken up, then surely you're going to have to go for the alternative, which is a bad alternative. I also believe that the fact that these wind farms are increasing in size in terms of the diameter of the rotors, it's going to affect birds of prey a little bit more. it also doesn't discuss the amount of insects being killed, which also has a huge impact on our ecosystem. I understand that climate change is the biggest threat to all of it, and of course it's very easy for me to say, yeah, wind power is bad because it kills stuff, but then at the end of the day, climate change is going to kill stuff. But do you not think we could tackle climate change without disrupting the environment as also, in terms of, not killing insects and birds, George?
I think, yeah. So I feel like what you said there, you said quite a few interesting things actually, and I'm gonna try and respond to each of them separately. I think the first was the space. The second was, there's only a small point, but the diameter of wind turbines, and then the last being the impact of death to insects that we haven't discussed yet. So the first, I definitely agree with you on that, and I think it leads to the conclusion that wind turbines aren't the only solution. They're not the holy grail. They're a fantastic, or at least in my opinion, a fantastic sort of tool to approach solving the problem. And they're definitely going to be part of solving the problem of energy production. However, it's not infinite, is it? It's only to a certain extent scalable. It's a solution that works for us because there's lots of wind, like we said. But even in the UK, how much can we manage versus a country where it's not as windy, there's less sort of thermal currents from the sea or whatever, however wind works, and then so therefore you end up with less efficiency and no point in really having them. The second, so I definitely agree with you there. The second point about wind turbine diameters, I can actually use. This is probably the only point in the podcast where I'll be able to use my degree, and maybe the only point at all.
I'm so happy for you, pal. I'm so happy.
Thanks.
Even though it's going against my point, I'm happy for you anyway.
Yeah, it's definitely going to. It's definitely going.
Go, hit me.
So you said that wind turbine diameters increasing in size is going to kill more things. But
I did
actually,
say that. Yeah.
Wind turbine diameter is you only want to increase it up to a certain point because there's a maximum diameter at which, if you increase it above that, the efficiency is decreased, I think, or at least either the efficiency is decreased or the amount of gain is decreased, because basically it's too hard for it to turn.
Yeah.
So, because obviously you've got a maximum wind power, and for each area, you want, if there's a really strong average wind power in that area, you're going to have a bigger turbine. But if it's really low, you can't have a huge turbine that's never going to get turned because it's just a waste of time. So there's actually, in general, because we don't live constantly in hurricane force winds, a maximum size of wind turbines. So they shouldn't really increase in size now that they've got to this maximum, this sort of physical maximum that we've reached. And then the last point, the discussion of insects being killed and having a big impact on our society. My response to that is, what about insecticides or impacts with cars? I think I want to retain perspective on these things. It's very easy to get caught up in the numbers with positive changes because we're almost trained to look for the negative hidden in there somewhere. It's like there must be something bad, and I suppose in many ways it's very important that we do that, isn't it? Because it's very easy to get caught up in that positive wave. We have to go, wait, hold on, what's the reality here? And maybe you're doing that better than me so far today. I admit that wind turbines aren't perfect, but they're also one of the best ways to make a difference in our quest to reduce climate change. They're also far less damaging in almost every metric that people use to argue against them than many freely accepted practices. In my opinion, arguing against renewables because of sort of minuscule disruptions to the environment is kind of crazy. Surely far more damaging practices should go before we start building a barrier to our only route out of the climate change catastrophe that we're approaching.
Frustratingly, I totally agree with the increase of the propellers. I in fact forgot about, propeller design. And
oh yeah, you would know.
I would
You'd
know. I
too.
don't know why
Your
I
degree
forgot
does
about
this
that.
too.
You could use adjustable pitch propellers maybe in the future, or skew them, or get the most efficient without having to get the biggest, using more blades, for example. And in terms of the arguments that you're making, it's really difficult for me to be fully negative because I'm agreeing with you on pretty much everything. The one thing I do find troubling with what you were saying was that you said a minuscule disruption. And so then what I would say to that as well is that two wrongs don't make a right. Just because insecticides are bad, more bad than wind power, doesn't mean that we shouldn't look at wind power also being bad too. I think, like I said, two wrongs don't make a right. The study that I read struggled to quantify the likes of insecticides killing insects. And it also struggled to find the impacts of cars, but it seems like you found something to do with that. And so because they didn't know the numbers for other things, they couldn't really compare of how damaging it is. But then on the flip side, because you cannot compare, it's very difficult for them to also say that it's not negligible, because they couldn't find a base of the effect of wind power killing insects, if that makes sense. If cars were doing it at a much greater scale, for example, maybe wind power is less bad, or insecticides are killing way more insects, which they probably are. Maybe it is less bad, but they couldn't find those numbers, so they just basically said we don't know if it's negligible or not. So I do disagree with the whole point of you saying it's a minuscule disruption, because we don't actually know. But then I do agree with you mostly.
Okay. I think, yeah, I can understand why they'd have come to that conclusion. I wonder the sources' sort of intentions with the work they are doing, because I think it'd be very difficult to quantify in a single study the effect on insects from insecticides, right, cars and wind farms. However, there are studies on all three, I believe. Well, less so insecticides, but that's because the numbers are astounding.
Yeah, it's very
We're
difficult.
talking trillions of trillions.
Yeah.
And so it's almost worth ignoring insecticides because they are incomparable. The reason you wouldn't compare them is because any argument you have against any argument you have that wind farms are causing too much damage to insects would be just wiped out by the fact that it's thousands of times more insects dying.
Yeah.
And in that sense, it's negligible. However, in the same breath, I think insect deaths from cars are very high. Although apparently they're reducing because so many insects have died from insecticides. The number of insect deaths due to cars is actually lowering because there are less to kill, which is
very sad.
Yeah,
I was going to say that because there's less insects in general.
But I completely agree that two wrongs don't make a right, and being like, oh well, this is way worse, so therefore it's like, it's like anything, trying to be like, oh, it's fine to burn my rainforest, or to burn my forest in my garden because the Amazon rainforest is way bigger and they're burning that more, so I'm fine. But it's not really. It's difficult because I don't know. But in the same vein, I think that it also, in some senses, does justify it, because almost everything we do as human beings has an effect on something, and more insects are going to die if we don't reduce climate change. So we need to use every avenue we can to stop that. And if we have to start that avenue and make strides with wind power before finding a solution that doesn't mince up tons of insects every year. And then we can start with that, and then we can reduce it later on. We can, when we find that other solution, the solutions that are available and become available, then we can reduce it.
Yeah. I mean, I agree that wind power on the whole is positive. But I think the points that I'm trying to make is that, there are failures in wind power, be it minuscule or not. It's still not the holy grail. I think it's almost like failing forward, right? Is exactly what you're saying. We have to do something rather than nothing. And you have to crack some eggs shells to make an omelette type situation. It's really difficult. And you saying that, yeah, of course, we always have an impact on everything, kind of makes it feel a little bit better, but still, I don't know. It'd be interesting once we talk about other forms of renewable energy to get a broader picture and see our opinion. I think, especially with you, nuclear is going to be exciting. I'm really for nuclear power. And so, yeah. And to be fair, George, I am only trying to find the negatives of wind power. I think we need to have an open discussion about the production, environmental and habitual factors as well. Like, for example, you would have to clear land to put these wind farms up, unless it's offshore, for example. But regardless, all these negative factors we can't brush under the carpet. We can't do exactly what like the oil companies probably did when they converted everyone from wood to oil or coal to oil. Those factors still exist. But then I guess on the other side of the hand, on the flip side, all those negatives that I did kind of try and bring up can be mitigated. I know that there's lots of scientists that are trying to design sensors or aerosol or some kind of solution to the deaths of birds and bats and insects.
Okay.
And also, of course, like I said, in terms of fiberglass, people are always trying to find a renewable material that is as strong as fiberglass, etc. So.
Yeah, I agree with you about carefully considering the reality and not getting ahead of oneself. I think I really appreciate it, and I think it's come into play a couple of the last podcasts where you've played devil's advocate with me.
Mate, because I feel like I've got to be the bad guy, kind of enjoy it.
Yeah, it's a strong effort. Because sometimes I'm leaning. I'm not necessarily. I don't think I'm misleading in what I say, but sometimes I miss out too many or brush over the negatives a bit too much in my haste to be positive about something. I think, having said that, I'm being overly protective in this instance because a lot of the arguments I can see against wind or wind farms, wind turbines, is that people are abusing big numbers to scare people and don't use those figures next to the much larger comparisons. So from what we've discussed today, we've been able to go, look, although two wrongs don't make a right, these figures and the figures of insecticides are just crazily bigger than the figures of wind turbines killing insects. And so you do have to retain perspective, because it'd be more productive to campaign against insecticides and for wind turbines than it would be to just campaign against wind turbines, because it's sort of a double negative in that sense.
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree. It's really interesting with the amount. For one, I don't blame you for skipping over few things to benefit us. There's there's so much information out there. You could probably find anything that confirms your bias.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Either way, but every time we do that, especially every time we do this, we both sort of have to be so careful, because if we find sort of a point and then try and find stuff to back it up, it's quite easy, because there is stuff out there. There's always stuff out there.
Mate, speaking of this, I actually followed on Facebook this climate denials Facebook group.
No. Wow.
And just to see, what the other people think. And to be honest, I can be bothered to read any of it, which is kind of saying on my part. But
have you ever read the Atlantean conspiracy?
No.
It's 200 reasons why the Earth is flat.
Oh, really?
It's the best thing in the world, especially as a physicist, because, I mean, unless everything I've been taught is wrong, which is possible, but probably
it is possible.
Because there's some pretty good evidence. Oh, there's just such good evidence for it, though. Such good evidence. It's so compelling.
Really? Are you joking or not?
Yeah, no, I'm not. No, as in for the Earth being round.
Oh, right.
Oh yeah, no, there's terrible evidence.
I thought it was really interesting.
Most of that would be that would be a real cannonball information.
Oh, that'd be amazing. I'd be like, stop this podcast right now. We're talking flat.
No. So I just love it, because you read it and they're like, oh man, they try and use examples of trains and planes and things like that, and they love to ignore the basic principles of physics. It's really good to read. It's nice. I like it.
I really don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but I really also want to.
I
watched a documentary on Netflix about the flat Earth.
Yeah.
And, I mean, for example, one of the tests, so-called, that they had was, I can't actually remember what they tested, but they spent quite a bit of money on trying to prove, of course, that the rotation, I think, or something was like 180 degrees or whatever. And that test kind of proved them wrong.
Yeah, they spent. I remember what you're talking about. They spent like $20,000 on a bit of kit that they were like, "This is undeniable. If this comes out, we've proven it. We've done it. It's gonna do it. We're gonna do it." And then they're like, "It must be." I think they got to the point where they
were blaming their equipment, mate.
They said that they were gonna put it in a bismuth tube to try and stop the heavenly energies from affecting the equipment.
It's just actually amazing. Regardless, it's just we are going to do a podcast on aliens and flat Earth theory one day, and we'll save it for a good time to do it.
Yeah. But for now, I think we should move on to the good and bad.
I think so too. So here at I Know Nothing, we like sharing some news that is positive, but also negative about the environment. We have to balance it, because otherwise it can get pretty depressing, and it can get pretty scary. And I think that's one of the major reasons why people don't want to do anything, because one, fear, and two, it can get very, very depressing. So, George, start us off with the good.
So the good, surveys have found that more than 40% of millennials who change their diet say it's due to environmental reasons. This is in the US specifically, but one would imagine that most Western societies would be fairly replicated within reason. And that's pretty cool, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, the source also said that 57% of millennials have changed their diets to be a specific diet, and 40% said environmental. And I think it was like 30 said ethical.
Right. Wow.
So it's pretty amazing, right?
That is really cool. What about the bad?
I mean, if we can just focus on that a little bit more, 40%, and that's 57% of millennials. And so, one of the things that you often hear is that what why should I do anything when other people are not? Well, shit. There you go. 57% of millennials are doing something. Being that.
Yeah.
Right.
Anyway, the bad. Sorry to try and drag you onto the bad.
I'm comfortable with playing the bad guy. It's a bit like wrestling. Yeah, you always have to have that anti-hero or that whatever.
Yeah, sure.
So the bad is the Amazon is still burning. Fires are still being started daily. I did read a news article a few days ago, and it basically said since the headlines have stopped focusing on the Amazon, 4,000 fires have been started in the past 2 days. And again, like I said, that was 4 days ago. So,
wow,
pretty crazy, right? I mean,
that is scary.
I think it was kind of hacky of me to say that was the bad news. But it's still pretty bad, and I feel much better in terms of still highlighting it when no one else wants to.
Yeah, exactly. We can't let this thing be ignored. There can't be this massive peak and then just let it go away because people will assume that it's stopped. That's how I think I view these things. If it goes away, it must have stopped. That's not true. I know that lots of things disappear from the news because they get boring or don't sell papers rather than actually disappearing. But anyway, what about the company in focus, Marcus?
So again, here at I Know Nothing, we believe in celebrating companies that care for the environment. So this week's company in focus is Microsoft. This is a little different to what we usually shout out, which are small to medium companies. But this one, I am happy to see a big company also trying to do their bit. Since 2012, Microsoft have set out a fully carbon neutral plan, such that they're changing a lot of things. Well, they have changed a lot of things in their company. They even have a carbon fee for everyone that deals with Microsoft. And they aim to do this by changing their culture in the company. For example, doing meetings online instead of driving. They accelerate green innovation in their business as well. And most importantly, they're tracking and reporting on everything they do to see if they can, see if they can make it a bit more efficient to minimize their effects that they have.
That is cool. I think I'm glad you picked this one today because it is good to see a big company sort of acting as a leader in climate change. And I think a lot of what Bill Gates and separately Microsoft have done to influence the environment is really admirable, because a lot of what they do it doesn't seem like it's really for promotion or for gain. It's really just to actually make a difference because they care.
Yeah. At what point do you say, "Oh, wow, we have made so much money. Let's pump it back in."
Get it back.
But it is really nice to see a big company do something. And to be honest, I did read the headline saying that they have actually reached carbon neutrality in their operational office, in their headquarters, effectively in the US. And it's just the subsidiaries of it around the world that are not carbon neutral. But I didn't really want to focus on that, just in case that source was wrong. Sure. But at least they have that plan.
Yeah, absolutely. So, challenge time. I think we took a loss on the Olio challenge, really. It's a shame because the idea is really good. I know that with you, Marcus, you didn't complete the challenge because you couldn't find anything, but what about we go again? And instead of you trying to get something, you actually offer something up if you don't finish it.
And I open-handedly take that challenge on board, George.
Nice, cool.
I tend to finish all my meals.
Of course.
But then
not a wasteful man.
No, but then I also overcook a lot of the time. So actually, maybe I should be doing this anyway. For that 13K, you know.
Oh, yeah. So I think we should start tracking, actually, who completes the challenges, because we need a bit of accountability so we can have a running score. I'm going to say it should be 1-0 to you for now, because although neither of us completed it, no, because you would have done it. If there'd been if it had been within 5K, you would have done it. So 5 kilometers, you'd have done it. So it's 1-0, and yeah,
I'm just not going to take that. At least you tried. I'm just not going to take that from you. I know what you're trying to do. I know what you're trying to do.
At least you tried, though.
You're trying to make me feel great, you know.
That's not what I'm trying to do.
No, George.
I don't build people up. I break them down.
I want to win off merit, not off.
Oh wow!
You know.
Oh, Marcus doesn't take handouts.
No, definitely not. Definitely
All right,
not.
fine. 0-0.
To the point where if I scored a goal in football and they were like, "Oh, let's check VAR to see, you know, if it was in or out," and I was like, "No, let's not check this. I didn't score the goal." Yeah. Oh, no.
That doesn't make sense.
No, okay. Here's the best example. I'm the goalkeeper.
Right.
And someone has scored a goal against me. And the ref's like, "Oh, let's check VAR." I'd be like, "No.
Yeah.
Don't check VAR. The ball is in the net. I failed. Let's go again."
Your team would hate you.
Yeah. I haven't really thought this one through. But yeah. Okay. So I say we just start 0-0, George. Starting from this week.
Okay. Fine, let's do it.
We are more accountable.
Sweet. Well, sadly that's all we've got time for. Don't forget to get involved in the conversation by following us and liking us at I Know Diddley or visiting our website, iknownothingpodcast.com.
Yeah, we really appreciate all the support. We're actually coming close to 200 listens solely off the audio part of our podcast. We also have a YouTube channel as well, which has crazy amounts of views compared. But 300 listens for a podcast is pretty amazing, George.
It's really cool.
So I just personally would like to say thank you. It's really humbling to have people even listen to us, even though we really know nothing about anything. We're just trying to figure it out like you guys. We hope the content is funny. We hope the content is informative. And if you stick with us, guys, we'll stick with you. And we'll keep trying to open better discussions. So, ciao.
Brilliant, mate. Goodbye.
Love you, mate. Bye.
Love you. Bye.